Awesome. So let's keep it interactive. Do send your questions and thoughts on chat whenever you think of something. And yeah, we'll take all the bigger questions in the end, but if you have a small clarification question, you can interrupt me. Great. So today we're going to talk about how behavioral science is applicable for products. And a very quick intro about me, it's already given. So I just wanted to mention a couple of things so you know what kind of questions to ask me. So as it was said, I work for Swiggy and for UNICEF. I've also worked with a bunch of startups, edtech companies, also slightly larger companies like Google and so on as well. So having a wider range of experience also means that you deal with multiple types of product managers. And I know a lot of you here are probably product managers. And the nice thing is talks like this helps you learn from each other. And there are always really nice things that startups do that larger corporations don't and so on. So we'll also cover a little bit of that, of how you can potentially learn ideas from others. So this is sort of the agenda for the talk. So we'll start off with just seeing what behavioral science is, and then I'll give you a small toolkit, stuff that you can start using from today onwards. And then we'll see how to use this toolkit. And I'll take you step by step on the whole process. So you'll really, really know how to do this. And we'll also use an example. So everything is really clear. Awesome. So let's get started with what behavioral science itself is. So it's a mix of psychology and microeconomics. So when I say microeconomics, it's sort of, if someone is an economist, it's the preferences and game theory and all of those things. And also a little bit of neuroscience, biology, statistics, and so on, right? So behavioral science is just, the whole point of behavioral science is trying to understand how people are thinking and how people are making various decisions. So one part of it is identifying and observing it. The other part is understanding what happens in the brain. So both happens. So once you know how people are thinking and making decisions, the good thing is that you now can influence decisions as well. So this is a really, really powerful skill to have. Imagine being able to influence other people's decisions, right? So it's a very powerful and very cool skill to have. So hopefully at the end of today's talk, you'll have a couple of tricks up your sleeve as well that you can already use. Awesome. So let's start off by understanding how exactly we humans make decisions. And for that, I'll give you an example. We'll start off with this small example. Using this example, I'll explain how we make decisions. So let's assume that you're in the movies and you're feeling really full. You just had your lunch and you're going to the movie, but you feel like having a small snack during the break. You're really full, so you can't really eat much. Which of these three would you want to eat? Right? So just please go to your browser and just type this URL. It's tiny.cc/WIP poll, women in product poll. So just type this and it should open a Mentimeter thing where you can answer. And if someone has any problem, please write it on the chat. Yeah, the link also has been shared in the chat. Will I be able to see the results as well, or should someone else share the screen? Okay. Is it visible? Yeah.
You're still seeing which team are you part of?
Okay, awesome. So is this the result? This is probably the results. See 25. So you see that a lot of you have picked A. Can I share my screen now? Okay, awesome. Cool. So a lot of you picked A, which is also what is typically observed in other large-scale experiments, right? Now, let me share my screen again. So here, let's say these are the prices that you see. Now, same condition, you're still feeling really full and you only want a small snack. Which one would you pick? Again, same link, please select your options. Whoever took over my share screen, please do it again. Cool. Can you go to the previous one as well so we can see the other answer? Oh. Oh, so was it cleared before?
Yes, so I think, yeah,
Okay,
it's
okay, cool. No worries. Cool. Awesome. I'm gonna take over the screen share again. Awesome. So what is typically observed? So you guys are pretty rational. So what is typically observed is that only thing that has changed between the previous option and here is that it was 200 rupees earlier and the middle popcorn is now 250 rupees. So typically people don't really pick the middle option because, yeah, if you're not really hungry, you go with the small one. And here, if you look at this third option, it's only 10 rupees more and you get so much more popcorn, right? So this middle option is typically called a decoy. And a decoy, what it does is it just makes another different option looks really attractive. So here now this looks like a really special offer, right? So let's just see what happened. So in this case, most people typically pick A. However, in this case, where the price of the middle option is changed, people pick C, right? So I didn't really change the price of C or A, which is what you all picked. But just by changing a different things option, people's preferences also changes, right? So yeah, that's called decoy. We'll see another example. So this is another really fun example. I really like this one. So apparently when instant cake mixes were introduced, the product folks who created it were pretty sure that this was going to be a blast because, hey, you just literally mix water, you put it in the oven, you get a cake. That's amazing product, right? But people were apparently not really buying it. So they were really confused and they were trying to make it even easier, saying, you really just have to add water, making it really, really clear on the cover, saying you don't have to do anything else and all of that. But people were not buying it. So then they spoke to the users and realized that the users felt that when they made the cake and someone asked, who made this cake? It's really nice. They weren't able to say, I made the cake because it was pretty much nothing they did. Right? So it wasn't about making the process easier. It was actually about making the process harder. So what they did was they said, hey, now you have to add 2 eggs and water and then beat the mixer and then you get a cake. Right? So actually made the process harder by just asking them to add eggs as well. And now the sales soared. Right? So it's not always easier sells more as well. So this is in behavioral science called IKEA effect as well. So IKEA, how you build your own furniture there. And when you build something on your own, you value it a lot more. So when you have to make the cake yourself, you find it tastier as well. So yeah, the conclusion is that humans are really odd, right? So this is a nice picture that I usually use. So we're not like Spark. We're not rational in all the things. We are driven by our emotions. We're pretty much like Homer. We just go, if we see some food, we go eat it. We say we're going to work out and then we're lazy. We don't go to the gym. It's something that we all do, right? So we are not really rational. And that's exactly what behavioral science tries to say. And behavioral science is not about stopping us from being irrational. It's not about forcing us to be irrational. It's just understanding that this is how humans are built and working around it, right? So why are we irrational? Why are we not rational in our decisions? So we make 35,000 decisions every day. So this is like an underestimate of how many decisions we make. So imagine if you have to make all of these decisions consciously, we'll be so worn out, right? So by the end of the day, we'll be pretty much done if you're making 35,000 proper decisions. So our brain is constantly running on autopilot. So in behavioral science, we call this, in behavioral science, we call this system 1 and system 2 thinking. So system 1 thinking is what we do 95% of the time, which is just really fast, automated thinking where you're not really sitting and thinking about everything, you're just going with the flow. So for instance, if you take a public transportation, let's say you take a bus, you don't really optimize and plan, okay, so if I sit in this seat, this seat has like nice neighbors. We don't really sit and think all of that. We just randomly pick something and go there, right? We probably have small points that we look at. So that's system 1 thinking. System 2 thinking is a little more rational, processed thinking where you take time, you weigh the pros and cons, and then you make a decision. And this is only 5% of the decisions that we make. So because we are pretty much running on autopilot, we make a lot of errors in the way we think and the way we decide, right? So we use a bunch of mental shortcuts, which in behavioral science we call heuristics. You don't have to know these terms, so ignore it if you don't want to listen. So the other thing is, heuristics are nice. So these are just mental shortcuts, right? But then sometimes these heuristics leads to incorrect or wrong decisions, and which is when we call it a bias. A heuristic becomes a bias when it leads to some, harmful or bad decision. So awesome. I'm going to skip the next part. So cool. So we've pretty much established that humans are irrational, right? So what do we do with it now? So I really, really like this quote. It says, our irrational behaviors are neither random nor senseless. They're systematic. We all make the same type of mistakes over and over. The product opportunity lies in helping people not make those mistakes. So what is good is that we're irrational, but we're pretty much very predictably irrational. So you can predict how irrational we're going to be, right? So it's the same type of mistake over and over. And there's this book by Dan Ariely who also said this quote called Predictably Irrational, a great book. I would recommend. It's a nice bedtime read, so you can just quickly read it. It's a fun book. So yeah. Now let's see what behavioral science actually is. So we saw what it talks about and what the philosophy is. Here, I'm going to start off by giving you a bunch of toolkits. So these are just tools that you can use to apply behavioral science. So imagine there's a lot of tools. I'm just going to talk about a few cherry-picked ones. These are a couple of heuristics and biases, which we saw earlier, which we'll look at now. Awesome. So in the chat, please mention how many of you think your driving skills are better than average. So if you think better than average, say better. If you think it's worse, then say worse. It's okay if you don't want to say it out loud as well. You can just think about it as well. Awesome. Cool. Cool. See so many, lots of better, little worse, but again, it's, you're writing it in the chat. So yeah. Anyway, so apparently 80% of people typically believe that they're above average drivers, right? And that's just not mathematically possible because average means 50%, right? So 50% should believe they're better than average, but 80% do. So perception is that so many are good drivers, but this is what the reality has to look like, right? This is called overconfidence. And we constantly see this in a lot of different places, like even stock market, investing, when you skip the onboarding, for instance, a lot of users typically skip onboarding saying, hey, no, I know all of this, just don't show me all of this, right? However, they probably don't, right? We're typically overconfident about our tech abilities. We're confident about how fast we can learn. I mean, just imagine the number of times we wrongly estimated how much time a project is going to take, right? Because we were super confident that, hey, this is so easy, I'm going to get it done in a day. No, we did not. So all of this is because of what we call as overconfidence. So decoy effect is something we saw already with the popcorn example. This is super commonly used in coffee shops and also popcorn shops and so on. You just start observing it and you'll see that there is often a middle option, which just doesn't make any sense. I'm pretty sure nobody buys it, but it's there mainly to push you from the smaller option to the bigger option. And even iPhone kind of uses it. So the Pro is pretty cool, but then Pro Max has everything Pro has, plus it's a larger screen and the price is not too different. So this is also sort of like a decoy here. More substantial data example is this one. So The Economist is known for using a lot of really cool behavioral science principles in their, in the entire website and the subscription model, everything. And this is how they show their payment structure. So they have one online subscription called economist.com subscription. They also have a print subscription. So I'll just kind of summarize this in a table. So if you have only the online subscription, it's 60 rupees, sorry, $60. If you have print and online subscription, it's 125. Right here, the web alone is the same price and both together is the same price, but they also introduced this thing called just print is also 125. So if you look at this is the decoy, right? Because nobody would buy this. Why would you buy just print when you can also add web for free here, right? And this is the results that were observed. So when this was the pricing model that was shown to a user, so many people, like almost twice as many people bought only the web subscription. However, when this middle option was added, nobody picked the middle option, it was 0. But the number of people who picked the $125 option is like so much more, right? So this is like a really cool trick to upsell your product to your users, right? So this is called decoy effect. Another thing you can also start looking at Now, when you look at pricing and all of that, you'll also start observing a lot of decoys in a lot of places. I think that's another really fun part of learning behavioral science. You start seeing all of these things all around you everywhere. Awesome. The next one is called status quo bias. So status quo basically means whatever the default is, right? So it's also known as default bias. It basically means that whatever is the default, we kind of stick to it more often than not, right? Because we're lazy people. But this is a cool example on organ donation. So if you look at these countries, these are all European countries, and I usually highlight these two because Germany is right next to Austria. They both speak German. The culture is super similar. The work culture, the way people think, religion, composition, everything is super, super similar. These are very similar countries, right? And in these yellow countries, if you want to donate your organ, you have to fill in an online form. You have to say, hey, I want to become an organ donor. In these blue countries, you're naturally assumed to be an organ donor whenever you're born. If you don't want to be an organ donor, you have to go and fill in a form, right? So here the default is that you're not an organ donor. Here the default is that you are an organ donor. And this is the percentage of people who have given consent to be on organ donors. It's massively different, right? One thing to note is that just because by default, a lot of people have been assumed to be organ donors doesn't mean they'll actually donate their organs, right? I mean, only a percentage of these people would, but still a lot of research has shown that whatever the default is, people tend to stick to it. And this is from IRCTC, like a slightly older version of IRCTC, but I'm sure you would have seen this in a lot of travel booking websites, where by default, they just select this option of, yes, I agree to the terms of this travel insurance policy. And this actually happened to me. So after booking a ticket, I got an email saying, hey, this is your travel insurance number. And I did not remember buying it. So then I went back on the website and I checked it and I was like, hey, this is not okay. I mean, it's less than a rupee, but still it's not okay when I wasn't given like explicit consent, right? So this really works very well, but it's very sneaky and therefore it's not really ethical, right? So now IRCTC, I believe, has removed this. But yeah, when you design stuff, it's okay to have defaults, but don't be sneaky and don't hide it out there. Make it like large and very visible in case you actually use defaults in this kind of way. Awesome. The next thing is incentives. So we are all super used to incentives. We know that incentives work really well. If you give coupons, bonuses, and so on, your users are happy. They use your products so much well, right? Does it always work? And I want to talk about this concept called perverse incentives. So perverse incentives are when incentives don't work the way you want it to work. It works in a different way. I'll tell a couple of examples and then I'll bring it back to, product space, and we'll talk about an example from the product space. So first example is about fossil collection in China. So in a small town in China, in an area, they found out that there were a lot of fossils underground. Because these archaeologists didn't want to go and dig everything up and find these fossils and all of that. There was this bunch of older civilization that they found a lot of fossils as well, and they wanted to dig all of this up. So they told the villagers, hey, if you collect all of these fossils and bring it to our office, for each fossil, we'll give you X amount of money, right? So what these people did is, okay, so if I give them one fossil, let's say I get 50 rupees. If I give them two, I get 100 rupees, right? So they'll take these fossils, go home, break it into a lot of small pieces, and then go and give, hey, here, 6 fossils. And they get 6 into 50 rupees instead of just getting 150. But that's not the ideal scenario, because as a paleontologist or whatever you are, you want the fossils to be full, not broken into pieces, right? So this is an example of perverse incentives. Similar thing happened in Vietnam with rats and in India with cobras. Do read up about cobra in India. So at some point, there were a lot of rats in Vietnam and a lot of cobras in India. 2 different stories. The government decided, hey, we need to get rid of this, but we can't do much. So let's tell the people that, hey, if you bring me a rat, catch a rat and bring it to me, I'm going to pay you some money. And in India, they said, if you bring a cobra, we'll pay you money. What people did is they started breeding rats in Vietnam in their houses in like nice areas, and they'll let it grow. And then once it becomes slightly bigger, they'll go give it to the office, bring money. So they started having farms of rat. And in India, apparently, they actually had farms of cobras where they started growing these cobras just so they can make a lot of money. Okay, so these are called perverse incentives. I'm pretty sure you've seen very similar stuff in your product where, let's say, a new user gets awesome coupons. How many times have we seen people create so many fake accounts just so they can get that initial amazing coupon that we give, right? So these are examples of perverse incentives where, you can't always do much there, but it's very important to know what is happening there. And while you design incentives, it's also important to see, is this incentive crowding out some other effect that we could have, which is an example we'll discuss now. So in Israel, in a daycare center, there was this really cool research that was done where they realized that a lot of parents are constantly coming late to pick up their children. So they said, hey, if you come late, you have to pay this fine from tomorrow onwards, right? And what do you think would have happened? So if you have to pay a fine when you're late to pick up your child, do you think you'll be faster or you'll come late? Comments, people, message. Awesome. So some of you think faster, some of you think late, but what did the school think? They assumed that, if you put a fine, people are going to come faster, right? But what actually happened was this. So this is the control group where there is no fine. And this is the group with the fine. And this is how late they are. So the group with the fine consistently came very, very late. Can you imagine what happened? So these parents just assume that, hey, now I'm paying them to keep my child for a little longer. This is slightly cheaper than babysitter. So I'm going to just pick up my child a little later. I'm paying for it, right? I don't even feel guilty anymore. So earlier I used to feel bad that, hey, the teacher's staying late and all of that. I don't have to care about it anymore. So this is again another example of perverse incentive. And yeah, cool. Let's talk about a few more concepts. Next one is social proof. It just means that, how if you want to know if you can trust an account or not, you go look at the number of followers they have. And then if it's like a lot of followers, then you're like, okay, maybe this person knows what they're talking about. Same thing for companies. Is this company credible? Oh yeah, they have, their clients include, I don't know, Google, Microsoft, and so on. So yeah, should be credible, right? This is social proof. So we look for other people's validity to validate something, right? So if everyone else is doing something, it must be right. A very common example of this is, let's say you go to a new city and you see two coffee shops. One coffee shop is really, really, really crowded. The other one is empty. We're more likely to believe that, hey, this crowded coffee shop should probably have really good coffee. So we should go there. And I also use this example. So saw that a lot of you are from Bangalore, and I'm sure you know this place called Rameshwaram Cafe. Now, I always say Rameshwaram Cafe is just running on social proof for real, because there's always a long line there. I mean, sure, the food is great, but yeah, everyone else goes there, so we also go there, right? And I'm sure you've seen this in websites where they put screenshots of how people are talking about them. They also put pictures of, we have so many customers, so many people, 1.2 million social media followers, and so on. These are all examples of social proof. Awesome. So this is another behavioral science tool. So I'm going to give you a few more tools and we'll tie it all together in the end. Next one is called peak and rule. It basically says that in a whole experience that you might have, when you're asked to remember and recall and say, how was the experience, you pretty much only remember the last part of it, the end, and whatever the peak moment for you was. In this example, if you look at it, you wait in line for a long time. When someone asks, say, how was the experience in the theme park, you talk about only the ride, right? So the ride is really fun, sure. But you waited for so long. If you actually think about it, it was a pretty boring wait there, but you don't really talk about that, right? Because you forget it. You remember the peaks take over. So this is called peak and rule. So we typically only remember whatever intense positive or negative things happen, and also the last few moments of the experience. So next time you go on a trip and you come back and you try to remember the trip, just try to see, okay, what are the points I'm remembering? And you'll realize that these are really the peaks that you had. So those are the only things we can really, really remember. Awesome. And this is a nice way of using this peak and rule. So in this airlines, in Cathay Pacific, apparently the flight attendants memorize the names of all first-class passengers. So when the first-class passengers are deboarding the flight, they apparently say, hey, thank you for joining us, and the name. So I'm just going to say, hey, Kritika, thank you so much for joining us, and so on. And that really gives you like a very nice peak there, right? Of, oh, wow, they remembered my name. And again, it's also the end, so you're more likely to remember. And given that first-class passengers expect exceptional, different service, they're more likely to recommend these airlines to their friends and so on. Last thing we're going to talk about is personalization. Personalization, we know, is like super powerful, super helpful. And yeah, marketing folks see an average increase of 20% in sales when the experience is personalized. And yeah, we've seen it across various brands. We've seen it across various different fields. It works everywhere in various different industries, right? Only note of caution is when you over personalize, when let's say Swiggy, for instance, is using my name, let's say Junofy, blah, blah. If they put Junofy in like 10 different places in that page, of course, it stops working, right? So that's just the only caveat that you need to make note of. This is Ritz-Carlton. So I don't know if anyone has stayed there. They always keep a personalized welcome letter for all their guests in the room. So when you go there, it's a handwritten note saying, hey, thank you so much for staying with us. We hope you have a nice stay here. This is like really nice, personalized, and it's your name there. And yeah, this really works. And it's been shown to improve the, again, this is also a peak moment that people remember, something that they might actually take back with them as well, right? So these are really nice ways of getting your customers to like you. Cool. Quick recap of what all tools we have seen. The next part is applying these tools. So we saw what overconfidence was. We saw how people think they're better drivers. We saw what decoy effect is. We saw what status quo effect is. We saw how, tickets sometimes add a travel insurance as the status quo. We saw what perverse incentives are. We saw about how rats were reared. We saw how faucets were broken. We also saw what social proof was. We saw what peak and rule is, personalization. Just so you know, there's like 500 more of these. These are just the most commonly used and commonly discussed behavioral science principles, which is why I covered these. And these are also going to be helpful for our next activity. Awesome. So where all can we apply behavioral science? I'm going to quickly run through this because it's a long list. So in an organization, the leadership uses a lot of behavioral science strategy. Even when you're discussing mergers and acquisition, how do you pitch your company? How do you negotiate all of that? Marketing, of course, sales and marketing use a lot of behavioral science. HR uses a lot of behavioral science, reducing attrition, getting better candidates. How do you write your job description? Lots of behavioral science there. Design and product uses a lot of behavioral science. And recently this is also shooting up drastically, where a lot of product-based companies are actually investing in behavioral science. And of course, there are lots of other areas where you can use behavioral science as well. How do you write emails that get responses, right? Cold emails, for instance. How do you name your company so people can actually remember it? And there's a lot of emotions that are related with names, and that's all spoken about in behavioral science. How can you manage your folks better? Are they not sticking to the deadline? How can you use behavioral science to actually make them stick to your deadlines? How do you negotiate? How do you resolve conflicts? How do you make friends? Everywhere. So behavioral science is like pretty much applicable in a lot of different scenarios. So apart from just using it in the product, you'll also end up using it in a lot of different areas. Cool. So behavioral science is typically used in the initial ideation phase of, what product should do, what features should we build and all of that as well. But also a lot on the optimization phase. So where you're trying to fix certain problems with your product. We'll be focusing a little bit more on the optimization phase today, and we'll do it using an example. So let's say you're working for a SaaS company, and these are the 3 pricing models that you have. So there's a free plan and there are 2 paid plans. You realize that most people are using the free plan every time, despite everything actually being a trial. People are not even trying the paid plans. So you want more people to try these paid plans and disregard the free plan, right? So that's your goal. You want more people to use the paid plans. So how do you approach this using behavioral science? And I'm just going to mention steps. I typically stick to these steps when I work, maybe not very consciously, but naturally you just end up sticking to these steps. And it's very important to stick to these steps. So first is defining your problem statement. I know it sounds really dumb, but it's really important. We'll see why. And then we do what is called behavioral mapping, which is trying to find why this problem is happening. The next part is how do you solve this problem? That's interventions. Then of course you test it and then you scale it, right? So the first step of defining the problem statement is super important, because you want to start with an outcome saying, hey, this is what I'm interested in doing. Already start thinking of the example that we spoke about, the 3 pricing model and what the problem statement there could be. So it's very important to have one key outcome saying, hey, this is what we want, right? And also think if you want to increase a specific behavior or do you want to decrease that specific behavior and so on. So in our current example, can you folks try and say what the problem statement could be? So yeah, this was the thing. I've written the goal, but just yeah, someone said increased paid plan adoption, increased paid subscriptions. Awesome, cool. So I would be even more specific if I'm actually working on this. We can go ahead with increasing the number of people who use this, but I would be very specific, something like the number of people who click on this specific button. And the next conversion is a whole other problem, right? So when I'm working on this specific page, I would only talk about what I want to be done on this page, which is I want people to click on this button or this button, right? So cool. So that's defining your problem statement. So you want to nudge users to directly purchase a paid plan and not go with the trial of the free plan, right? Okay, so the next step is behavioral mapping. This is something we're going to do together now. So this looks pretty much like this. You know how in crime solving, people try to connect all the dots. It's exactly how behavioral mapping also looks like. So this is just a bunch of various things that could happen, whatever is driving this behavior, right? So we try to like map out the whole behavior. So let's say here, people are clicking on the free plan and not on the paid plan. Why could this be? What are the different reasons why people could be doing this? So that's called behavioral mapping, right? And typically the way we do it is, of course, like read up a lot of literature. It's super helpful. There's always a lot of research done on all areas. And I often see folks in product companies not really looking at old research papers. They usually fill with insights. Do that. And of course, talk to your users, talk to stakeholders, and also look at all the data, right? So again, all data as in like all swipe data, all click data, every single data that's available at hand, right? Okay, so now we want to know, why do our new users not select a paid plan, right? So we'll do this as a Jamboard activity. I'll share the link here. So this is the link, it's tiny.cc/WIP talk. I'm assuming it'll also be shared on chat. Okay, yeah. So please click on that link and so when you get on this page, can you see my screen? Can you see that Padlet thing? Okay, cool. So just click on this thing on the right bottom and write your reason. So I think this is, okay. So let's say this is my reason, just write it, click publish. That's all, simple. So everyone can start writing, and it's okay if your reason has already been listed as well. You can write it multiple times. We'll just take just 1 or 2 minutes, so not too much time. Just quickly go here, write your reason, click publish. Okay. Cool. So if free solves most of your requirements, then there's not much benefit for you to go to the paid plan, right? And paid plan probably doesn't seem worth it. You just want to try it. It's too expensive for you. You don't see value. Okay, cool. We're getting a lot of different reasons. If on a good day, the perfect way to do this would be in person, where you all stick sticky notes on a wall and then we categorize it and arrange it and we figure out what we think is the big reason here. But yeah, cool. So everyone can read these different reasons, right? So you have the link, just have a look at it in a bit. We'll get back to this page. We'll go back to the Jamboard in just a bit. So yeah, you did the Jamboard activity now. So what it would look like is, okay, so this is my problem. I'll put that in the middle and I'll write all the possible reasons around it. And then I'll try to solve for each of this reason, right? So let's assume people are not seeing value in the paid plan, right? How do you show value for your paid plan? People think it's too expensive. How do you stop people from thinking it's too expensive? So that's the way you would think, right? You're trying to solve for all the reasons there. And just to help ideate on different interventions that you can do, we use frameworks in behavioral science. You don't have to, but it's a good rule of thumb, especially when you're starting off. It's nice to use these frameworks. So we'll just talk two very simple frameworks. There are hundreds of frameworks, better ones as well, but these are simple and these are nice. So the first one is called 3B framework, which basically says, find out what behavior you want to change. What are the barriers that are stopping it? What barriers can you add or remove to drive that behavior? What benefits can you add or remove to drive that behavior? Here, for instance, you want to probably add some barriers to the free plan, add some benefits to the other two plans, remove any barriers that are stopping people from buying the paid plan and so on, right? I just added a very small example just for us to get an idea of how it looks like. Okay, so this is how it looks. Clearly, there's not much information, right? So that's a barrier. So information is a barrier, right? So I'd like to know a little bit more before I actually click on something. If I don't get any info, then why would I buy the basic or professional plan, right? So something like this could be helpful, right? Where you know what each of these plan offers, and then you can select something better. So this is called information barrier, right? Increasing benefits. What could be an example of increasing benefits? Giving, let's say, discounts, right? So this is a way of course, a way of increasing benefits. Hundreds of other things that can be done. We'll see a couple of other things again in a bit. But yeah, this is the area, this is the line you have to think. And so of course, this cannot be the only benefit. There can be other benefits as well, right? So for instance, here there's 24-hour support. Here there isn't. Here there's 24/7 support. That's a benefit that you're giving, right? And again, these are some areas for you to ideate in. The other framework is called EAST framework. It basically says that if you want a behavior to happen, you have to make it easy, attractive, social, and timely. So easy just means that, don't add a lot of friction, make it really easy. So if, for instance, I can give you an example. So in a national park where there was an ice cream stall and people would just eat the ice cream and keep throwing the wrappers on the floor. So what they did was, there was a dustbin right next to the ice cream stall, but people usually bought the ice cream and started walking, right? So they can't really go back and throw the trash. So they realized that typically it's taking somewhere between 2.5 to 3 minutes for them to finish an ice cream. And they decided, okay, so they calculated how far a person would walk in 2.5 minutes and kept trash cans there, because that's where a person would finish their ice cream and want to throw the wrappers away, right? So that is making the whole process easy. You don't have to walk to throw your trash, so you're more likely to throw the trash. And they actually made the trash can like look really cute, like a monkey styled trash can. It's also attractive. And also it's timely in the sense that they actually planned how much time would be needed for this whole activity, right? So that's also being timely. So again, I'm going to show just a small touch of what it can look like when you apply this framework on our example. A lot more can be done to it, right? I'll just cover the very, very basics. So this is how we made it look like in the previous framework. This is how we can make it look like. So let's just see. We added a social component here saying, hey, this is really popular. A lot of people are using it, right? And we made it look a lot more bigger and salient, which is making something attractive. So we call this visual hierarchy. It's basically whatever is most prominent in your eyes. So in this particular example, we're just assuming that we want to sell the basic plan, right? So it's bigger. There's a timely offer there as well. So it says there's a timer running out, literally pushing people to buy it. Right. So these are, again, certain principles you can use to make the whole thing work a little bit better. And if you actually see, I did not reduce the price because often, the organization would not be okay to reduce the price. So you can actually, this is not a great ethical way, but organizations do bump up the price and then show a discount for the actual price that they actually want to sell it at. So if you see, it's still 400 here. Awesome. So here, without any monetary change. You're not offering anything more. You're not making it cheaper. You're just changing the small design elements here. And this would, I can already say this would definitely sell so much better, right? Yeah, I'll just show a couple of other things that can be done just so you get an idea of what else is possible. So you can use visuals, colors, right? So here, for instance, it's so much easier to spot all the twos versus here. So in a page full of black, if you add some colors in some places, immediately people's eye would go there, right? You can use angles where everything is straight. If you use a little bit of slant, it works. Of course, the size works. If something is like massive on the screen, people look at it. And I know a lot of you have heard the word nudge. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of what nudges could look like. So nudges is basically, instead of asking people to do something, you're just making it a little natural for them to automatically want to do it, right? So for instance, you can ask your child to go clean the room, or you can say, hey, let's play a game. Let's see who can clean up faster. You take that half of the room, I'll take this half of the room, make them clean, right? Becomes a lot more fun and they end up doing it. The difficult way to maintain weight is, let's say, counting, checking all the calories that you're consuming, having a diary and all of that. The easier way is, research shows that when your plate is smaller, you eat lesser. So when you have a larger plate, you eat much more. So why not just swap your large plates for smaller plates, right? You're naturally now prone to eating less, right? The traditional way is to have like a budget for how much shopping you're doing, not spending too much money in grocery stores and so on, so on. The other way of doing it is carrying a basket instead of a trolley. So when you have a trolley, you're more likely to like dump a lot more stuff. Firstly, lots of space. Secondly, you're not carrying it, not difficult. So if you carry a basket, you'll just take much lesser stuff, right? So these are called nudges. And these are also typically very, very, very helpful. Awesome. It can also look like text, right? It doesn't even have to have any design element. It can be as simple as text. For instance, here they say it's in high demand. 9 people are looking at it right now. It was booked 139 times in the last 24 hours. So they're basically using what we call scarcity, saying, hey, this room is going to run out. There's only one room left, but also using social proof, saying a lot of people have been booking this. This is a bestseller, right? This is another example. So even here they say there are already 3 people looking at this hotel, right? Which means it's going to get sold out. They're using scarcity to drive behavior. Awesome. So this is like a bunch of examples of how these interventions can look like. So let's see what we did this probably took like a few minutes, and I'm sure all of you are capable of already thinking till this level, right? So we can use like a lot of behavioral science principles to really, really drive behavior just by doing small design changes, not really doing anything big. Even small things like changing color, changing the font, all of that really, really helps. So to give you another example, instead of blue here, let's say everything else is blue, but just this button, if you put it in, let's say green, people are more likely to click on it, right? Here you see that I've capitalized all the free. So when people see free, people look at it immediately. So it's proven to catch people's attention, right? So you can use a bunch of such things to get people's attention and change the way people make decisions. And we already spoke about decoy effect, for instance. We haven't even done it here, but you know how you can actually drive people to buying this. Maybe by adding another plan here, which is a little lame, but as expensive as this, then people are more likely to buy this, right? So yeah, this is how we typically apply behavioral science. And of course, the most important part is, so now we have A, we have a B, we go ahead with A/B testing, right? And just make sure that not too much is changing between these two pictures. Here, for instance, we have changed so many things. This is like not great experimentation. It's always good to just change one thing at a time. What we typically do is, instead of just A/B testing, we have like A, B, C, D, like multiple versions, and test all of them. And definitely do this because just because something worked in, let's say, the US, it doesn't mean it'll work in India or vice versa, right? And it's really, really important that we check, because the culture is different. To give you another context, in China, if the apps are minimalistic, they don't work. People don't like it. Whenever it's crowded and chaotic, people actually really like it. It's the other way around in Europe, for instance. If something is really chaotic and crowded, people hate it. They like minimalistic apps. So really, really, these small things matters, and culture really matters, and which is why can't just go without testing. I'm not going to talk about scaling because I'm sure you're all done it a billion times. But yeah, quick recap. We saw what behavioral science is and why it's relevant. We saw a bunch of common biases and heuristics, which I think would be really helpful when you're actually trying to apply it in your product. Then we saw how you can use it. We actually went through the steps of it, defining a problem statement, behavioral mapping, which you did in the Jamboard there. Whenever you're doing it in real life, you just use a pen and paper. It's always the best way to go about. And keep adding to it. So think about ideas. Like right now, you just thought and you wrote some possible reasons, right? It's really important to also look at research, talk to users, and keep adding stuff to it. Sometimes removing stuff, because sometimes we think something might happen a particular way, it wouldn't, right? So then you also remove it. So yeah, then we spoke about a couple of frameworks that can be used to ideate for interventions. Then you test it and then you scale it. So yeah, this is how the whole life cycle of a behavioral science project would look like. You also have a couple of toolkits, so you can hopefully be able to do your own projects as well. And yeah, I think we have few minutes for questions.
Yes, yes. This was such an insightful and engaging session, Junofy. There is a lot of love coming for you in the comment section. Such a friendly content and amazing one. So yeah, we'll take a few questions. So there is a question by Pallav. He mentions that, does Swiggy use decoys effect too? And as we know, often prices of product differ on Swiggy compared to actual price.
Okay, yeah, I get a lot of Swiggy questions. So yeah, firstly, we don't have decoy pricing anywhere at Swiggy. And secondly, the prices on Swiggy is different from outside, because the way Swiggy's business model works is that they charge 30% of, or 30, 12, whatever percentage of the bill. And therefore the restaurants have to fix the prices on Swiggy. It's not Swiggy that decides the prices. So the restaurants generally increase the price and put it on Swiggy. So yeah, not really behavioral science, but yeah.
Hope this answers your question, Pallav. Okay, one more question by Unnati. Is it ethical to make up stats, example for scarcity or social proof?
No. So we typically create like our own ethical guidelines whenever you're using behavioral science, specifically because this is very impactful. It can actually change people's decisions, and therefore with power comes responsibility, right? So one of the rules that we have is like absolutely no lies anywhere, right? So any data that you show, it has to be real. There are two people looking, you say two. If there isn't, then we just sort of don't show it. Instead of saying, you know, if you want to, let's say if you have an event coming up and you have just 20 people who have registered, you don't want to show it, just don't show it, right? Start showing it after it reaches that threshold you want to do. But yeah, don't fake it till you make it, because once your credibility is gone, people are not going to trust you. So for instance, the IRCTC example I gave, now every time I book there, I'm just constantly looking out saying, I'm sure they have some sneaky stuff somewhere. I don't trust them, right? And that's not a great thing for a brand. So I would totally recommend you to not do that. So yeah.
Okay. Another question by Saurabh. Would love to hear some examples of application of behavioral science in sales or customer interactions or conversations.
Okay. We did look at few in terms of customer interaction, the Ritz-Carlton, for example, where they leave a personalized note, or learning the name of your user. In terms of sales, for instance, like I would recommend you to go read up some case studies on Salesforce. So what they did was they tried to understand how different scripts influence sales decisions. So, you know, for instance, how do you start your conversation, saying good day versus hello, hey, you know, all of that actually impacts the whole emotion journey, and that apparently really, really affects the sale happening or not. So I would suggest you to go look there. That could be really interesting. Yeah.
Cool. Hope this answers Saurabh. Another question by Pooja. Are there any resource materials that talk about other potential frameworks beyond the 3B and EAST framework?
Yeah. I can share a bunch of them in just a second on the chat. Maybe we could take another question.
Awesome. One question by Pallav again. What's the biggest insight that you have got about users at Swiggy?
Yeah, I do. I'm just not sure what I'm allowed to share. I don't think I'm allowed to share most of them. I'm really sorry. Would like to share some of them, but I don't think I can.
I think we can move to the next.
Yeah, probably. Okay, yeah, I can actually share something. So, you know how people can claim refunds on Swiggy. And a lot of people claim fake refunds. So we can see if it's fake or not. We typically don't act on it, but it's typically tagged as fraud claim when someone is making a claim and it's false. These fraud claims are really, really high in the evening compared to like any other part of the day, even if the order is low later in the night. So as the day gets later and later, the percentage of fraud claims goes up and up. So I think that's really interesting. Like more fraudulent people are either ordering in the evenings, or people are probably just more prone to be evil in the evenings. But yeah.
Awesome, awesome. And what's the opinion of a behavioral scientist on incentive, as it reduces quality of loyal user and promotes corrupt practices?
Yeah. So as the behavioral scientist, we typically don't play around too much with the incentives itself. And that's like a constraint that we take, in the sense that any project I would take up, I wouldn't ask them, hey, can we have a budget for coupons? Like that's something that I wouldn't go into. So that's something that's outside of behavioral science. So when I say the power of behavioral science, it's usually how do you not use money but still drive a particular behavior, right? So I would typically personally shy away from incentives. And also incentive designing is often taken easily. It's not that simple, in the sense that, for instance, let's say you've been giving a free subscription to your newsletter for a long time. When you start adding a price, for instance, or let's say you've waived off the fee for 5 months and now you're suddenly adding a fee, people are not going to be happy, right? And there's going to be a huge churn. So if you look at all of those things in a very critical way, you'll realize that incentives are actually very, very tricky. And even at Swiggy, for instance, I'm sure a lot of you would have seen how the one prices change, and there's a lot of coupons that come in there. That's like probably one of the most problematic problem that Swiggy deals with, is the coupons around one membership and how disappointed users are when they see that someone else has cheaper price than them. So yeah, incentives are like super, super tricky. I would typically not play with money, but rather play with design. So yeah.
All right. So we have another question by Pooja. Have you observed any differences while using behavioral science frameworks in B2C versus B2B users?
Right. So yeah, the way we deal B2B products is very different from B2C, mainly because certain things just don't work with the certain kind of target audience. So for instance, let's say I am Amazon. The kind of target group that I have, the kind of people who order on Amazon is different from, let's say, when I make sales as a SaaS product that I'm selling to other founders, right? So the kind of interventions that I use would be very different. Like social proof at Amazon could be something as simple as, I don't know, Priyanka Chopra has a similar handbag, might not really work for a SaaS product, right? I'm just giving examples. So because the target group is very different, the kind of interventions are different. However, the principle or the framework or the base is very similar. So I would use the same base. It's just that I would be a little mindful of the target group. Yeah.
I think there are a couple of more questions. Do you want to continue, or if there are any time constraints, Junofy?
We could maybe take one or two more, but I'll have to run off after that. So.
Okay, cool. Let's take two more questions. So one question by Abhik: how can I use behavioral policies to reduce attrition rates?
Attrition with respect to employees, or?
Can you give a little more reference on the chat? Meanwhile, let's take another question.
Mostly employees.
It's employees. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, lots can be done. So firstly, there's a lot of research around how building communities and support groups within organizations really help employees not leave the company. There's this book called Power of Moments. I would totally recommend you all to read it. So this is a book that talks only about this whole peak end rule that I mentioned. And there they explain this very beautiful onboarding experience and how such a nice onboarding really reduces the number of attrition that happens. So here, when you join the company, your manager comes to the main desk and welcomes you. And, there's a handwritten note waiting for you on your desk from the CEO saying, hey, welcome to this family and all of that. Like how typically, at least right now, all onboarding kits are sent by post. In this book, they clearly explain why you shouldn't do that and why it should be in person and the whole personal connection around it. So that is one area of research that's been done. There's another whole area, again, because I'm not a big fan of incentives. I typically don't like them. But how they give this joining bonus saying if you leave in 2 years, you have to pay it back and all of that. So yeah, that plays into what in behavioral science we call loss aversion. When you have some money, you really don't want to lose it, right? So you end up staying longer than you want to. But yeah, there are a lot of different ways in which attrition can be reduced at organizations. Yeah.
I hope this answers a week. So, okay, the last question by Madhuparna. What would be the difference between behavioral science and emotional intelligence?
So I would say emotional intelligence is, at least the way I see it, is a part of behavioral science. So when you say behavioral science, it includes like a wide range of things. I mean, the initial slide, I also mentioned how, even neuroscience, biology, and all of that comes into behavioral science in different forms. And for instance, one thing that I would do as a behavioral scientist for auditing a product is I would see through their entire flow. Let's say I'm auditing the onboarding flow. I look at the entire set of screens and I would be like, okay, map the emotion journey throughout, right? So at this page, I want the user to be excited, but the actual emotion that they're feeling is tired, right? How do I make them excited from tired? Or let's say on this particular page, I want the users to be, especially on charity websites, for instance, I actually want the user to be sad. I want them to feel bad for the person there, right? But are they feeling that emotion, right? If not, how do we get that? So like playing around with emotions and influencing it and all of that also comes sort of within behavioral sciences forte. And again, another thing, in case someone is interested, and you can also read up about color psychology and how various colors and even fonts, the pictures that you can use, all influence emotions. So certain colors brighten people up, certain colors make people feel low. So yeah, you can play around with all of that, and that all definitely comes within behavioral science.
Awesome. Okay, I think folks, you can connect with Junofy on LinkedIn and you can ask her more questions. Due to time constraint, we'll be stopping right now, but
sorry, I just want to add one thing. In case someone is really interested in behavioral science, you can also join this community. It's called India Behavioral Economics Network. It's a free non-profit community, very similar to Women in Product. It's just that we do a lot more behavioral science related stuff. So yeah, awesome. Thanks.
that's amazing. Cool. I think before we end, can everybody, turn on the camera so we can just take a picture with Junofy? We'll have. Okay, I can see. We'll wait for a few more folks to open up their cameras. All right, I think we can click a picture. Yeah. Thank you so much, folks. Thank you, Junofy, for such an insightful and such an engaging session. I think it was amazing. And folks, do share your learnings on social media. We have already shared the hashtags, and I think there is also a feedback form out so that we can improve and align our sessions from the next time. So please do that. And yeah, we'll see you in the next events. Karthi, is there something you would want to add to wrap the event up? Yeah.
What an amazing session, Junofy. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation and being here. And this has been one of the most, I think, vibrant sessions out of all the talks that we have conducted. So yeah, thank you so much. I think we are all going to come to IBEN and crowd you there.
Amazing. That'll be nice. Take care, everyone. Bye. Thanks for joining.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Junofy.
Thank you, folks. Bye-bye.